Don't move, follow me." The boy's voice was barely louder than a whisper, but something in it made Richard Calloway stop in the middle of his own driveway. He had been walking toward the silver town car waiting at the gate, briefcase in one hand, phone in the other, his mind already 3 hours ahead in a boardroom across the city. Now he was standing perfectly still on the polished stone path, looking down at a small boy in a faded blue shirt who had appeared from behind the rose hedges like he had been waiting there for hours. "What did you say?" Richard asked. He recognized the boy, or at least he thought he did, the housekeeper's son, maybe 10 years old. He had seen him a few times helping his mother carry laundry baskets across the back lawn, but he could not remember ever speaking to him directly. "Don't move," the boy repeated, even quieter this time. "Please, sir, follow me. Don't let the man at the gate see you." Richard glanced toward the gate. His driver was standing beside the town car, holding the rear door open, looking down at his phone. Nothing seemed wrong. Nothing seemed out of place. The morning was bright. The sky was clean. The engine of the car was humming softly the way it always did when his driver had been waiting for more than 2 minutes. "Son, I'm late for a meeting," Richard said, trying to keep his voice patient. "Whatever this is, can we talk about it tonight?" The boy did not let go of his sleeve. His fingers were small, but his grip was firm, and his eyes were not the eyes of a child playing a game. They were the eyes of someone who had not slept the night before. "If you go to that car," the boy whispered, "you won't come back. I heard them say it last night. In the kitchen, please, sir." Richard felt something cold pass through him, but he pushed it away. He had built his entire life on logic, on numbers, on the discipline of not reacting to surprises. He was the founder of one of the largest private logistics firms on the East Coast. He did not change his schedule because a child told him to, but something about the way the boy was holding his sleeve made him look once more at the car at the gate. And this time he looked carefully. The car was the same model, the same color, the same plate as far as he could tell from this distance. The driver was the same height, the same build, wearing the same dark jacket. Everything was as it should be, except for one thing. His regular driver, a man named Anthony who had worked for him for almost 4 years, always wore a small silver ring on his left thumb, a gift from his late father. Anthony was not a man who took the ring off, not even when he washed dishes or worked on his car. Richard had once teased him about it at a Christmas party, and Anthony had told him the story behind it, and Richard had felt slightly embarrassed for joking. The man at the gate was not wearing a ring. "How do you know what you heard?" Richard asked quietly, his eyes still on the driver. "How do you know it was about me?" "Because they said your name," the boy whispered. "Mr. Calloway, they said it 3 times, and they said your wife paid them already, half last week, half when it was done." Richard's chest did not move for a long moment. He felt his lungs stop and then start again slowly, the way they always did when he received very bad news in a meeting and could not let anyone see it. "Walk with me," he said quietly. "Slowly, toward the side of the house. Don't run, don't look at the gate." The boy nodded once and let go of his sleeve. The two of them walked together across the stone path, past the fountain that Richard had paid more for than most people pay for a car, past the marble bench where his wife sometimes drank her morning coffee, and around the corner of the house where a tall row of cypress trees blocked the view from the gate. When they were behind the trees, Richard knelt down so his eyes were level with the boy's. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elijah, sir." "Elijah." Richard nodded slowly, as if locking the name into a place inside his head where important things were kept. "Tell me everything, slowly, don't skip anything, start from last night." Elijah took a deep breath. His shoulders were trembling slightly, but his voice stayed steady. "My mom was making tea in the kitchen," he said. "It was late. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I came down because I forgot my book." The lights in the kitchen were off, but I could hear voices on the back patio. 2 people, a woman and a man. The man was not from the house. I had never heard his voice before, and the woman was Mrs. Calloway. Richard kept his face very still. "She said," Elijah continued, "everything is ready for the morning. She said the driver had been replaced. She said her husband would be in the car at 8:30, and that he would not notice because he never notices anything in the morning, because he is always reading his phone." Elijah paused, and his eyes filled with something that looked older than 10 years. "And then she said, sir, that after today she would finally be free." Richard Calloway stayed very still behind the cypress trees, listening to his own heartbeat in his ears, and felt the entire shape of his life shifting underneath him like a floor that had just stopped being solid. For a long moment, Richard Calloway did not speak. He stayed crouched behind the cypress trees, one hand resting on the cold stone of the garden wall, the other still holding his briefcase as if it were the only thing connecting him to the world he had walked out of 3 minutes earlier. The sound of the town car's engine drifted softly from the gate, patient, mechanical, indifferent. "Elijah," he said quietly, "do you have anything else? Anything you can show me? A note, a picture, anything?" The boy hesitated. He looked down at his shoes for a second, then reached into the front pocket of his shirt and pulled out a small black object. It was an old phone, the kind that had been new maybe 6 years ago, with a cracked screen held together by clear tape along the corner. "My mom gave me this one when she got her new one," Elijah said. "It still records sound. I was scared, so I pressed the button. I held it near the door." Richard took the phone carefully, the way a man might handle a piece of glass that had been pulled out of a wound. He looked at the screen. There was a single audio file saved from the night before, 11 minutes and 42 seconds long. "You recorded it," Richard said. "I didn't know what else to do, sir. I thought if I told my mom, she would say I was dreaming. I thought if I told nobody, then nobody would believe me later." Richard nodded slowly. He pressed play. The first thing he heard was the sound of dishes settling in a sink, and then almost immediately the soft sliding noise of the patio door. Then his wife's voice, calm and warm in the way she always spoke at dinner parties, saying something he could not quite make out at first. He raised the volume. "Has to look ordinary. He has to walk to the car himself. If anything is forced, if anything looks wrong, the police will find it within a day. He has to get in willingly." Then a man's voice, deeper, slower, careful in the way a person sounds when they are reading from a list they have memorized. "He will. 8:30 is his window. He never varies. He walks out, he opens his email, he gets in the car. The new driver knows the route. There's a place outside Hartwick where the road bends along the reservoir. The car will stop there. The rest happens after." A pause. A small sound that might have been ice in a glass. "And the policy?" the man asked. "It pays out after 7 months," his wife answered. "Accidental death, double indemnity. The lawyers have already reviewed it. There is no contest because there is no other beneficiary. I am the only one. The house, the company shares, everything moves through the trust to me. The board cannot stop it. They tried to put protections in 2 years ago, but he signed them away during the merger." He never read the third page. Richard closed his eyes. He remembered that day. He remembered signing a stack of documents at a hotel desk in Boston while a junior lawyer pointed at the lines. He remembered being told that the third page was administrative language, standard, nothing to worry about. He remembered feeling tired and not asking. The recording continued. "And after?" the man's voice asked. "When everything is settled?" "Then we wait," his wife replied. "A year. Maybe longer. We do not appear in the same room for at least 18 months. We say nothing. We change nothing. Patience is what makes this work." The recording went on a little longer, but Richard stopped the playback. He did not need to hear the rest. He had heard enough to know that whatever life he had been living that morning, that life had ended sometime during the night while he was asleep upstairs. He looked at Elijah, who was watching him with the patient eyes of someone who had been waiting all morning to be believed. "Your mother," Richard said carefully. "Does she know you recorded this?" "No, sir." "Did she hear them too?" "I don't think so. She had the kitchen radio on. She was making tea. I think she heard nothing." "Good," Richard exhaled slowly. "I need you to keep it that way for now. Do you understand? Not because your mother would do anything wrong, but because the more people who know, the more people are in danger." Elijah nodded. He had the kind of seriousness in his face that did not belong on a child. Richard slipped the old phone into the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he stood up slowly, brushed the dust off his trousers, and looked out through a gap in the cypress branches toward the front gate. The town car was still waiting. The driver had finished with his phone now and was looking toward the house, no longer relaxed, his weight shifting from one foot to the other in the small way a man does when he has been told to wait somewhere for a specific reason and is starting to wonder why he is still waiting. Richard took out his own phone and tapped a single name from his favorites. The line rang twice. "Richard, you should be in the car already. The Hartwick meeting starts at 10. Marcus." Richard's voice was very calm. "I am not going to Hartwick today. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without telling anyone in the office. Not Helen, not the legal team, no one." There was a pause on the other end. Marcus Vale had been his lawyer for 19 years, and he had only heard Richard speak in this exact tone twice before. Once during the takeover battle in 2014, and once on the night Richard's mother died. "Tell me," Marcus said. "I need everything on my life insurance policy, every change made in the last 2 years, every signature, every adjustment to the beneficiary clause, and I need it in the next 90 minutes. "Richard, what is happening?" Richard looked down at Elijah, who was looking back up at him with the same steady eyes. "Something I should have noticed a long time ago," he said. Marcus did not waste time with more questions. He said only, 90 minutes, stay where you are, and ended the call. Richard stood behind the cypress trees, holding the silent phone in his hand. He could feel his own pulse in his fingertips. He had negotiated against governments. He had bought companies and sold them in the same week. He had walked into rooms full of people who wanted him to fail and walked out with their signatures on his paper. None of it had prepared him for the simple act of standing 20 feet from his own front door and not knowing who in his house wanted him alive. His phone rang. The screen lit up with a single word, Vivian. He almost did not answer. But he understood in the same calm and distant way he had understood the recording that not answering would tell her something. She would call the driver. The driver would walk up to the house. The plan would shift, and whatever advantage he had right now would disappear into the morning air. He pressed the green button. Vivian. Richard, where are you? The driver just texted me. He says he has been at the gate for almost 10 minutes. Her voice was warm, patient, slightly amused the way a wife sounds when her husband has forgotten where he put his keys again. I came back inside, Richard said. I forgot a folder for the Hartwick meeting. I think I left it in the study. Oh, do you want me to come help you find it? No, stay where you are. I will be out in 2 minutes. Hurry, darling, you know how traffic gets. I know. He ended the call and looked down at Elijah, who had not moved. She is in the house, Richard asked quietly. She was on the back patio 20 minutes ago, Elijah said. When I saw your car pulling around to the front, I came to find you. I did not see where she went after. Richard nodded slowly. He thought for a moment. Elijah, he said, I need to see her one more time. I need to see her with my own eyes before I do anything else. Do you understand why? The boy thought about it. Then he nodded. Because if you don't see her, he said, you might still believe she didn't do it. Richard looked at him for a long second. He realized that this child, in a faded blue shirt with a cracked phone in his pocket, had just described the exact shape of his hope in fewer words than Richard could have used. Yes, Richard said. Exactly. They moved together along the back of the house, staying close to the wall, ducking under the low windows. Richard had not crouched like this since he was a boy himself, hiding from his father in the cornfield behind the small house in Macon where he had grown up. He was surprised at how easily his body remembered. They reached the corner of the south wing. From there, through a screen of climbing jasmine, they could see the back patio, the long stretch of lawn that led to the gardener's shed, and the white wrought-iron table where Vivian sometimes had her morning coffee. She was there. She was not alone. The man sitting across from her was the man whose voice had been on the recording. Richard knew it before he could explain how he knew it. He was tall, lean, somewhere in his early 40s, with the kind of carefully kept hair that men have when they spend more time on their appearance than they admit. He was wearing a dark gray jacket over a black shirt, and his hands were resting on the table near hers, not touching, but close enough that anyone watching would understand. Vivian was smiling. She was wearing the light blue dress that Richard had bought her in Florence 2 summers ago. She had told him at the time that she would save it for something special. The man said something Richard could not hear. Vivian laughed softly and reached across the table and laid her hand on top of his. By tonight, she said, just loud enough to carry across the lawn, this will all be over. Richard did not move. He did not feel anger. He did not feel grief. He felt something stranger, something that did not have a name, something like the feeling of watching a photograph of yourself slowly catch fire from the corner inward. The man lifted her hand and kissed the inside of her wrist. And then, he said, we begin. Richard turned away from the screen of jasmine. He looked down at Elijah, who had also seen it, who had also heard it, and whose small face had gone very quiet. Come with me, Richard said. They walked together back along the wall, around the corner, and through the side door that led into the laundry room. Richard knew this part of the house only vaguely. He had spent 26 years living here and could not have told anyone, before this morning, what the laundry room looked like. He found this fact almost funny in the cold and distant way he was finding many things funny right now. He took out his phone again and tapped a different name. Anthony, he said when the line picked up. I need you to listen carefully and not ask questions yet. Are you at home? Yes, sir, I'm off today. You told me last week, remember? You said the company was sending a car from a different service because mine is in for service. I figured you got the dates mixed up, but I didn't want to call and bother you about it. Mr. Calloway, is something wrong? Richard closed his eyes for a brief moment. There it was. The lie had been planted last week by someone who had access to his schedule, his phone, and his trust. Anthony, he said, your car is not in for service, is it? No, sir, it's in my driveway right now. I thought so. Richard exhaled slowly. I need you to drive over here, park 1 street away. Do not come up to the gate. I will call you again in a few minutes and tell you what to do next. Richard ended the call with Anthony and stood very still in the laundry room. Through a small window above the dryer, he could just see the corner of the front gate. The town car was still there. The fake driver was still standing beside it, waiting for a man he believed would walk out, get inside, and not see his own home again. Richard turned to Elijah. The boy was standing near a stack of folded towels, his small back pressed against the wall, watching him. "Elijah," Richard said softly, "I need you to do something very important, and I need you to do it the way I tell you. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Go to your mother. Tell her you are not feeling well. Tell her your stomach hurts and that you want to lie down. Do not lie about anything else, just that. Then stay in your room until I come and find you. If anyone at all, comes and asks where I am or what I am doing today, you say you have not seen me since breakfast. Can you do that?" Elijah thought about it. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said, "I can do that." "Good." Richard knelt down again the way he had behind the cypress trees so that his eyes were level with the boy's. "Listen to me. What you did this morning was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. I want you to remember that. Whatever happens in the next few hours, whatever you hear, whatever you see, I want you to remember that you saved a man's life today, and that nothing that happens after this changes that fact. Do you understand?" The boy's eyes were very wide and very still. "Yes, sir." "Good, go." Elijah turned and walked out of the laundry room. Richard heard the soft sound of his shoes on the tile, then on the wooden floor of the hallway, then nothing. He stayed where he was for almost a full minute, listening to the house. It was strange how a house could feel familiar for 26 years, and then in the space of a single morning feel like the inside of a stranger's body. Then he straightened his tie, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of the laundry room. He did not go to the front door. He went to his study first, because that was where the missing folder was supposed to be. He stood in the study for 30 seconds, opened and closed a drawer, walked to the bookshelf, walked back. He was setting a small piece of evidence in his own mind, the way a chess player sets a piece without yet knowing how he will use it. He did not yet know who in this house was watching, but he wanted there to be a trail of him doing exactly what he had said on the phone. Then he walked to the front foyer. Vivian was already there. She had come in from the patio and was standing by the long mirror adjusting an earring. She turned when she heard him. "There you are," she said warmly. "Did you find it?" For one long second, Richard looked at her. He looked at the woman he had married in a small chapel in Virginia, the woman who had cried during his mother's funeral, the woman who had once held his hand in a hospital waiting room for 14 hours without letting go. He looked at her and he saw, beneath the soft and familiar smile, the cool calculation of a person measuring whether a problem had been solved. He had spent his career reading faces across boardroom tables. He could not understand how he had never read this one. "I found it," he said. He held up the folder he had picked off his desk in the study. It contained nothing important, just printed copies of a quarterly forecast that had already been emailed to him 3 days ago. But Vivian did not know that, and she nodded. "Good," she said. "Now go, you'll be lucky to make it on time." "I know." He took a small step closer to her the way a husband does when he is about to leave for the day. He kissed her on the cheek lightly, just below the ear. Her perfume was the same one she had worn for 9 years. He had bought her the last 3 bottles himself. "I love you," she said. He did not answer that. He could not. He simply smiled, the small private smile he had used 1,000 times before, and turned toward the door. He walked out onto the front steps. The town car was 30 feet away. The fake driver had straightened the moment he saw the door open, and was now standing beside the rear door with one hand on the handle. Richard walked down the steps slowly, looking at his phone the way he always did in the morning. He scrolled through emails he was not reading. He did this for the length of the path. He did this until he was perhaps 15 feet from the car. And then, without breaking his pace, without looking up, he changed direction by about 10 degrees, just enough to pass the car and continue toward the small pedestrian gate on the far side of the driveway. The fake driver hesitated. Richard could feel it without looking. The man had been told exactly what would happen. The man had been told that Richard would walk to the car without looking, would get in without looking, would close the door without looking. The man had not been told what to do if Richard walked past him. "Mr. Calloway," the driver said. Richard kept walking. He raised the phone slightly to his ear as if taking a call and said in a clear and ordinary voice, "Yes, I'm walking out now. No, I'll meet you at the corner. The driveway is blocked." He pushed open the pedestrian gate and stepped out onto the street. The town car did not follow. It could not. The driver had no instructions for this. Richard walked 20 steps down the sidewalk, turned the corner, and saw Anthony's silver sedan idling against the curb, exactly where he had been told to wait. Anthony Reed had been Richard's driver for almost 4 years, and in that time he had seen Richard tired, angry, distracted, and on 2 occasions slightly drunk after a particularly difficult quarterly review. He had never seen him look the way he looked now, walking down the sidewalk with his briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other, his face composed in a way that did not match anything happening around him. Richard opened the passenger door and got in. He did not sit in the back. "Drive," he said. "Anywhere, not toward the office, not toward the airport, just drive." Anthony pulled away from the curb. He waited until they were 2 blocks from the house before he spoke. "Mr. Calloway, you want to tell me what is happening?" "I will, but first I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Last week, when you got the message about your car being in for service, who told you?" Anthony thought for a moment. "It was a text from the company dispatcher, came through the normal channel." "Did you call to confirm?" "No, sir, I didn't think to. The message had the right format. It came from the right number. It said you'd be using a different service for the week and that I should take paid leave. I figured the company was switching providers again. They do that sometimes." Richard nodded slowly. "Anthony, that message did not come from the dispatcher. It was made to look like it did. Someone has been planning this for at least a week, possibly longer, and whoever it was had access to my schedule, your number, and the company's communication formats." Anthony's hands tightened on the wheel. He did not ask for more. He did not need to. He had been driving wealthy men long enough to understand what kinds of plans took a week to set up. "Where do you want me to go?" he said quietly. "There is a coffee shop on Pierce Street. The one with the green awning. Park behind it. My lawyer is meeting us there." They drove the rest of the way in silence. Richard watched the city slide past the window and thought about how strange it was that everything outside the car looked exactly the same as it had yesterday. Mothers were pushing strollers. A man was unlocking the front door of a hardware store. A delivery truck was double parked beside a bakery. None of it knew that a man had almost disappeared from the world this morning. None of it would have noticed if he had. Marcus Vale was already at the coffee shop when they arrived. He was sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees and a leather folder. Dressed in the same plain, dark suit he wore to every meeting, whether it cost $10 or 10 million. He stood when Richard walked in, and the two of them shook hands in the careful way of men who had known each other long enough to skip the rest. Anthony stayed by the door, his back to the room, watching the street. Richard sat down. Marcus slid one of the coffees across the table. "Tell me," Marcus said. Richard told him. He told him in the same flat and efficient voice he used when reporting losses to a board. He left nothing out. He told him about Elijah, about the recording, about the patio, about the dress from Florence, about the man with the carefully kept hair, about the fake driver, about Anthony's text message. He spoke for almost 15 minutes without stopping. Marcus did not interrupt once. He listened the way good lawyers listen, which is to say he wrote nothing down but missed nothing. When Richard finished, Marcus took a long sip of his coffee. "All right," he said. "I have the insurance information. I had it within 40 minutes of your call. I have not slept much in 19 years, and I do not intend to start today." He opened the leather folder and laid 3 printed pages on the table. "Your policy," he said. "Issued 11 years ago. Original coverage, 4 million. Standard for a man in your position at the time. It has been adjusted twice. The first time was 8 years ago after the company went public. Coverage was raised to 12 million. That adjustment was routine. I was in the room when you signed it." He tapped the 3rd page. "The second adjustment was 14 months ago. The coverage was raised to 35 million. An accidental death rider was added, which doubles the payout to 70 under specific circumstances. The beneficiary clause was simplified. All conditional language was removed. Vivian is now the sole beneficiary with no contestable provisions, no waiting period, no exclusions for the first 2 years of the new coverage." Richard stared at the page. He could see his own signature at the bottom. He recognized the shape of it. He recognized the small curl he always put at the end of the second letter of his last name. He did not remember signing it. "This is mine," he said quietly, "but I do not remember this." "I expected that," Marcus said. "The signature was witnessed by a notary in a small office in Greenwich. The notary's name is on the 2nd page. I made some calls this morning. The notary retired 4 months ago and moved to Arizona. He has not answered his phone in 2 weeks. Richard set the page down slowly. "Vivian was in Greenwich 14 months ago," he said. "For the Hadley fundraiser, I remember because she came home and showed me the photographs." "Yes," Marcus said, "and the day before the fundraiser, according to the notary's log, you signed this document." "I was in Tokyo that day." "I know." The 2 men looked at each other across the small table. The coffee shop hummed quietly around them. Someone laughed at the counter. A spoon clinked against a cup. "Marcus," Richard said, "I want to know everything, who he is, where he comes from, how long this has been planned, and I want to know it before she does." Marcus closed the leather folder and looked at Richard with the steady patience of a man who had spent his career delivering bad news in measured doses. I already started, he said. I have a private investigator who has worked for me for 15 years. Her name is Hannah Reyes. She is very good and very quiet. I called her before I left my house this morning. She is already pulling records. Good, Richard said. What else? The insurance company will not pay out a claim without a body. Even with the accidental death rider, even with the simplified beneficiary clause, there has to be a death certificate or, in the absence of one, a court order declaring legal death after a missing persons case has been open for a specified period. In this state, that period is 5 years, so whatever they are planning, it does not end with you simply disappearing. It ends with you being found dead in a way that looks accidental. Richard absorbed this. The road outside Hartwick. The road outside Hartwick, Marcus confirmed. Where it bends along the reservoir, there have been 7 fatal accidents on that stretch in the past 9 years. The water there is deep. The current pulls toward the spillway. Cars have been recovered weeks later, sometimes months. It is exactly the kind of location a man would choose if he wanted an accident to look like an accident. Richard did not say anything for a moment. They thought of everything, he said finally. They thought of most things, Marcus corrected. They did not think of the boy. Richard's phone buzzed on the table. He looked down. The screen showed Vivian. He let it ring twice. Then he picked it up. Vivian. Richard, where are you? Her voice was no longer warm. It was not yet alarmed, but the warmth was gone. The driver called me. He says you walked past the car. He says you got into another car at the corner. What is going on? There was a problem with the car, Richard said calmly. I noticed something was off. A different driver, a different plate. I called the company and they had no record of the change. I thought it was safer to leave. I am with Marcus now. We are sorting it out. There was a small silence. Richard could almost hear her mind working on the other end of the line. He could almost see the small calculations she was making, the same calculations she had probably made 100 times in the past year, weighing what she could say against what she could not, what she could explain against what would expose her. That is very strange, she said. Are you all right? I am fine. Do you want me to call the police? Not yet. Marcus is handling it. The company is investigating. I will be home this afternoon. Richard. Her voice softened, became careful and tender in the way that he now understood was a kind of weapon. I am worried. Please come home. Whatever this is, we can figure it out together. I know we can, he said. I will see you soon. He ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. He looked at Marcus. She does not know yet, Marcus said. No, she knows the plan failed. She does not know I heard the recording. Good, keep it that way for as long as you can. The longer she believes you suspect only the driver and not her, the more time we have to gather what we need. Richard nodded slowly. Then he looked toward the window of the coffee shop at Anthony standing patiently by the door. There is a boy, he said. At the house, the one who told me. Yes. He went to his room. I told him to stay there, but his mother works in the house. The man I saw on the patio is gone now, but he will come back and Vivian will tell him what happened and they will start looking for reasons. They will start looking for how the plan went wrong. They will look at the staff. They will look at the boy. Marcus considered this. How many people work on the property? 6 full-time, the housekeeper, who is the boy's mother, the gardener, the cook, 2 security personnel, 1 assistant who handles the household scheduling. There are also contract workers who come and go. And the boy's mother, does she live on the property? Yes, there is a small staff residence behind the south wing. She and her son have lived there for almost 3 years. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number. He spoke quietly for less than a minute, then put the phone down. Hannah will have someone watching the residence within the hour, he said. Unmarked. They will not interfere unless they need to. But they will be there. Thank you. There is something else you need to think about, Richard. Yes. Whoever this man is, whoever Vivian has been planning this with, he is not just a boyfriend. The level of planning, the access to your documents, the manipulation of your driver's schedule, the manufactured signature, the choice of location. This is not a man who fell in love with your wife and got carried away. This is a man with experience, with patience, with a method. He has done something like this before, or he has been close enough to people who have. Richard looked at the closed folder on the table. Then find him, he said. Find out who he is, find out where he comes from, and find out who else he has done this to. Marcus nodded. He gathered the folder, stood, and rested one hand briefly on Richard's shoulder before walking out toward the front of the shop. Anthony caught Richard's eye from across the room. Richard signaled him over. Anthony, he said, I need to go back to the house, not yet, not today, but before this is finished, I will need to go back, and when I do, I need you to be the one driving. Anthony nodded once. I will be ready, sir. Richard looked out the window at the ordinary city continuing its ordinary morning. He had work to do. That afternoon, Richard checked into a small hotel on the north side of the city, the kind of place that catered to traveling consultants, and did not ask questions about late check-ins or cash payments. Marcus had chosen it. Marcus had also paid for it under a different name, used a corporate card that did not appear on any of Richard's accounts, and arranged for a single room on the 4th floor with a window facing the parking lot. Richard sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before he did anything else. He looked at the carpet. He looked at the small painting of a sailboat above the desk. He looked at the curtains, which were the color of old coffee. He had not stayed in a room like this in 20 years. He found to his own surprise that he did not mind it. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from Marcus. "Hannah has a name, calling you in 5 minutes." Richard nodded to himself, even though there was no one in the room to see it. He stood up and walked to the window. The parking lot below was almost empty. A delivery van was idling near the back entrance. A woman was loading groceries into the trunk of a small sedan. The world continued without him. The phone rang. "Marcus! Hannah is on the line with us. She's going to walk you through what she found. Listen first, questions after." A new voice came through, low, calm, professional. "Mr. Calloway, my name is Hannah Reyes. I'm going to keep this brief because we have a lot of ground to cover and not much time. The man you saw on your patio this morning is named Daniel Brennan. That is the name he is currently using. It is not the name he was born with." Richard sat down on the edge of the bed. "Go on," he said. "He was born Adrian Halst in Wisconsin in 1981. He changed his name legally in 2009 after the death of his first wife. Her name was Margaret Halst. She was 41 years old at the time of her death. She fell from a hiking trail in northern Michigan. There was an investigation. It was ruled accidental. She had a life insurance policy of $3.2 million. He was the sole beneficiary." Richard closed his eyes. "In 2014, Hannah continued, he was engaged to a woman named Karen Lynn. She lived in Seattle. She was a software executive. She broke off the engagement 6 months before the wedding date. Her reasons are not in the public record, but she filed a restraining order 3 weeks after the breakup. The order was granted. He left the state within a month. And then, in 2017, he married a woman named Renee Castell in Phoenix. She was 53. He was 36. She was wealthy. She had no children. They were married for 2 years and 8 months. She died in 2020. A house fire. The fire department ruled it accidental. He was not home at the time. The insurance payout was $4.8 million. Richard did not move. "And now," Hannah said, "he is here, with a new name, with your wife, with a $35 million policy and a stretch of road outside Hartwick." For a moment, no one on the line said anything. If this story is gripping you so far, please tap the like button and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Stories like this only reach the people who need them when you share them. Subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you too. "Hannah," Richard said finally, "does Vivian know any of this?" There was a small pause on the other end of the line. "I cannot answer that with certainty," Hannah said. "But based on what I have seen so far, I would say no. The information about Adrian Halst is not easy to find. The name change was clean. The records are scattered across 3 states. The only reason I found it as quickly as I did is because the notary in Greenwich, the one who is now in Arizona, had handled paperwork for Daniel Brennan once before, in a real estate transaction 2 years ago. That gave me a thread to pull. Without that, it would have taken much longer." "Then she is also a victim," Marcus said quietly. "She is also a participant," Richard replied. "Yes, both things can be true." Richard rubbed his hand slowly across his face. The cold and distant feeling that had been holding him together since the morning was beginning to crack along its edges. He could feel it, the way a man feels the first small movement of a wall that has been about to fall for a long time. "What do we do?" he said. "We have several options," Marcus said. "We can go to the police now. We have the recording, the insurance documents, the false signature, the witness, the history on Brennan. It is enough to open an investigation. They will arrest him within 24 hours, possibly sooner. Vivian will be questioned. She will hire a lawyer. The case will move slowly, but it will move." "What is the other option?" "The other option is more difficult and more dangerous. We give Brennan another chance to act. We let him believe the plan can be salvaged. We watch where he goes. We listen to what he says. We catch him not just on intent, but on action. We catch him in a way that closes every door he might try to walk through." Richard looked at the small sailboat painting above the desk. "He has done this twice before," he said. "At least twice. And both times he walked away." "Yes, then we do it the second way," Richard said. "I do not want him to walk away again." Marcus was silent for a long moment. "All right," he said. "Then we begin tonight." That evening, Richard returned to the house. Anthony drove him through the front gate at 6:45, the way he had 1,000 times before. Richard sat in the back seat with his briefcase on his lap, and his face composed in the careful neutrality he had practiced for an hour in front of the small mirror in the hotel bathroom. Vivian was waiting for him at the front door. She had changed. She was wearing soft gray pants and a cream sweater, and her hair was pulled back the way she wore it when she did not want to look like she had tried. She came down the steps and took both of his hands. "Thank God," she said. "I have been worried sick all day." "I am all right," he said. "What happened with the car? Did you find out anything?" "The company is investigating. It looks like someone impersonated the dispatcher and rerouted the assignment. Marcus thinks it may have been an attempted robbery. There have been a few of these in the city recently. Wealthy men, black cars. The drivers are sometimes paid off." He watched her face as he said it. He watched for the small flicker of relief that would tell him the explanation he had constructed was being absorbed exactly as he had intended. It came, a small softening around her eyes. A faint exhale she did not realize she had been holding. "That is horrible," she said. "I am so glad you noticed. I almost didn't, but you did." "Yes," she put her arms around him. He returned the embrace, gently, the way he always had. He felt her breathing against his shoulder. He felt, for the first time in many hours, the specific sadness of holding a person who has decided you are worth more dead than alive. It was a sadness without sharp edges, slow and large and quiet, like a tide that had been coming in for a long time and only now was high enough to notice. "Come inside," she said. "I had cook make your favorite. We can have a quiet evening." They had dinner at the long table. She lit candles. She poured him wine from a bottle he had bought 2 summers ago in Bordeaux. She asked him questions about his day, about Marcus, about the company's response, and he answered all of them in a calm and ordinary voice, giving her enough detail to seem honest and not enough to seem rehearsed. She listened. She nodded. She reached across the table once and touched his hand, and he let her. After dinner, she suggested they sit in the garden room. He agreed. They sat together on the long sofa, and she rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and he looked out through the tall windows at the dark shape of the patio where she had sat that morning with another man and decided exactly when he would die. At 10:30, she said she was tired. She kissed his forehead and went upstairs. Richard waited 15 minutes. Then he stood up, walked quietly through the dark hallway to the back of the south wing, and let himself out the side door. The night air was cool. The staff residence was a small brick building tucked behind a hedge of boxwood with 2 windows in the front and a single yellow light glowing above the door. He knocked softly. The housekeeper opened it. Her name was Tessa Walker. She had worked in the house for 3 years. She had a tired, intelligent face, and when she saw Richard standing on her doorstep at nearly 11 at night, she did not look surprised. She simply stepped back and let him in. "He is asleep," she said quietly. "He came home this morning saying his stomach hurt. He did not eat much at dinner. He fell asleep on the couch around 8. May I see him?" She led him through the small front room, past a tidy kitchen with 2 clean cups drying on a towel to a doorway at the back. Elijah was curled on a narrow bed under a thin blue blanket. His shoes were on the floor beside him. His school bag was open on the chair with a notebook spilling out, the pages covered in small, careful drawings. Richard stood in the doorway and looked at him. "Tessa," he said quietly without turning around. "I owe you the truth, some of it tonight, the rest in a day or 2. Will you sit with me for a few minutes?" She nodded and led him back to the small kitchen. They sat across from each other at a wooden table. She did not offer him tea. She did not waste motion on small things. She simply folded her hands and waited. He told her, not everything, not Adrian Halst, not the recording in full detail, but enough. He told her that there had been a plan against his life that morning, that her son had warned him, that her son had almost certainly saved his life, and that the people behind the plan did not yet know that they had failed in the way they had failed. Tessa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat for a long moment with her hands still folded. "I knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "Not this, but something. He has been quiet for a week. He has been drawing the same things over and over. I asked him 3 nights ago if anything had happened, and he said no. I should have asked harder." "He kept it from you to protect you," Richard said. "Not because he did not trust you." She nodded slowly. Her eyes were wet, but she did not let anything fall. "What do you need from me?" she said. "I need you to act in front of my wife and anyone else exactly as you have always acted. I need Elijah to stay in this house with you until I tell you otherwise. There will be people watching the property quietly. You will not see them. They are there to keep you safe. And in 2 days, perhaps 3, this will be over. And then, he said, we talk about what comes next." The next 2 days passed slowly, the way a held breath passes. Richard moved through the house the way he had always moved through it, with the calm and slightly distracted attention of a man whose mind was on his work. He took calls in his study. He ate breakfast at the small table by the window. He kissed his wife on the cheek when he passed her in the hallway. He smiled at the cook. He nodded at the gardener. He did not change a single small habit because every habit was a piece of evidence in a story Vivian was reading, and any change would be a line out of place. On the second night over dinner, he mentioned the trip. "I have to go to Hartwick on Friday morning," he said. "The meeting from this week, they rescheduled it. I should have gone on Monday. I cannot put it off again." Vivian looked at him across the candles. She did not react immediately. She took a small sip of her wine, set the glass down, and then nodded. "Of course," she said. "Is the company sending a different driver this time?" "Marcus is arranging it through a new service. He says they have vetted everyone. Anthony will be driving. I told the company I wanted him specifically." "That sounds wise." "It is." She smiled at him. He smiled back. They both ate their dinner. Somewhere in the dark space between them, two plans were now moving forward at the same time, and only one of them knew that. Friday morning came clean and cold. Richard came downstairs at 7:30 in a dark suit with his briefcase and his coat over his arm. Vivian was already in the kitchen. She handed him his coffee. She straightened his tie. She kissed him at the door. "Be safe," she said. "I will." The car at the gate was a black sedan, identical in model and color to the one from Monday. Anthony was standing beside it in his dark jacket and his cap, his left thumb resting on the door handle with the silver ring catching the early light. Richard walked to the car at his usual pace. He did not look at his phone. He looked at Anthony. Anthony gave him the smallest nod. Richard got into the back seat. Anthony closed the door, walked around, and got into the front. The car pulled smoothly out of the driveway. For the first 10 minutes, they drove in silence. They took the main road out of the city, then the highway north. The morning traffic was light. The sky was the color of pale slate. Anthony's eyes moved often to the rearview mirror. "They are behind us," he said quietly. "How many?" "One car so far, a dark gray sedan, 2 men inside. They picked us up near the Wilcox exit. They have been 3 cars back since then." "Hannah's team is tracking them." Richard nodded. He looked out the side window at the trees beginning to turn gold along the edges of the highway. He thought about Adrian Halst, who had once stood in a courthouse in Wisconsin and signed papers changing his name. He thought about Margaret Halst, who had gone for a hike on a Saturday morning and never come home. He thought about Renee Castill, who had bought a house in Phoenix and lit candles at dinner and gone to sleep one night and never woken up. He thought about Vivian, who at this moment was probably in the garden room with a cup of tea, waiting for a phone call that would tell her the worst day of her life had finally arrived. He did not feel rage. He had thought he would, but he did not. He felt something quieter, something harder to name, the way you feel when you watch a long sentence finally come to its period. Anthony took the exit for Hartwick. The road narrowed. The trees grew closer to the shoulder. After another 12 minutes, they came over a low rise and the reservoir appeared on the left, a long, flat sheet of water held in by a curving guard rail. The gray sedan was still behind them, 2 cars back now. A third car appeared ahead, parked at a small turnout where the road bent along the water. As they drew closer, Richard could see the driver standing beside it, leaning casually against the door, his face turned away. He was the same man who had stood at the gate on Monday morning. Same height, same dark jacket, same wrong hand on the door handle. "There he is," Anthony said softly. "Keep driving past." Anthony drove past. The man at the turnout straightened slightly as they went by, then turned and got into his car. In the side mirror, Richard watched the gray sedan 3 cars back signal and slow. "Now," Richard said. Anthony pressed a small button on the dashboard. 2 black SUVs that had been parked a quarter mile down the road pulled out and blocked both lanes. The gray sedan braked hard. The car from the turnout pulled out behind it and was immediately boxed in by a third unmarked vehicle that had been following from a side road. It happened very fast and very quietly. There were no sirens. There were no flashing lights yet. Men and women in plain clothes stepped out of the SUVs with calm and practiced efficiency. The gray sedan was opened. The 2 men inside were pulled out and put on the ground. The driver from the turnout was already out of his car with his hands raised. Anthony pulled to the side of the road and stopped. He turned in his seat to look at Richard. "It is over," he said quietly. "No," Richard said. "Not yet." He took out his phone and called Marcus. "Marcus, they have the men on the road. Tell Detective Sandoval he can move on the house." Then he closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the seat, just for a moment, and listened to the wind moving over the surface of the reservoir. When Richard arrived back at the house an hour later, Anthony driving slowly through the open gate, the front of the property was already filled with quiet activity. 2 unmarked cars sat near the steps. A pair of plainclothes officers stood by the front door. Detective Sandoval, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the patient, watchful face of someone who had seen the worst of people and chosen not to be surprised by it anymore, was waiting for him on the front walk. She did not run, the detective said quietly as Richard stepped out of the car. She did not call anyone. She was sitting in the garden room when we came in. She looked at us for a long moment and then she said only one thing. What did she say? She said he told me he had done this before. She said it twice as if she needed to hear herself say it. Then she stood up and put her hands behind her back without being asked. Richard nodded slowly. He did not feel triumph. He did not feel vindication. He felt more than anything a deep and ordinary tiredness, the kind a person feels at the end of a long journey that should never have been necessary. They led Vivian out of the house a few minutes later. She walked between two officers, her head not bowed but not raised, her face neither defiant nor pleading. As she passed Richard on the front walk, she stopped for the briefest second. She did not speak. She only looked at him. And in that look he saw, for one strange and final moment, the woman she had been 26 years ago in a small chapel in Virginia holding his hand. Then she walked on and the officers helped her into the car and the car drove away. Richard stood on the front walk for a long time after it was gone. The case moved faster than any of them expected. Adrian Halst, who had introduced himself to Vivian as Daniel Brennan, was charged within 48 hours with conspiracy, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and identity fraud. The two cases from Michigan and Phoenix were reopened. New evidence was found in both. The driver from Monday morning made a deal and named everyone. The recording from a small cracked phone in a boy's pocket became the cornerstone of the prosecution. Vivian was charged as a co-conspirator. She did not contest the charges. Her lawyer told the court she wished to enter a plea. The judge accepted it. Richard did not attend most of the proceedings. He had been there once at the first hearing and that had been enough. There were some things he had decided that a man did not need to watch twice to understand. In the weeks that followed, the house changed. Not in the way houses change after a death, but in the way houses change after a long fever finally breaks. Richard moved his bedroom to a smaller room on the east side, where the morning sun came in through clean windows. He sold the cars he did not use. He gave Anthony a permanent position with the company, with a salary that made Anthony argue with him for 20 minutes before accepting. He hired a new household manager, an older woman named Doris who had run a small bed and breakfast in Vermont for 30 years, and the house began, for the first time in a long time, to feel like a place where people actually lived. Tessa Walker stayed. Richard had asked her if she wanted to, and she had taken 3 days to think about it, and then she had said yes. She moved into a larger residence on the property, a small cottage with a real fireplace and a sunroom in the back. Elijah enrolled in a new school in the fall. Richard paid for it, and for the one after it, and for whatever would come after that. He did not call it a gift. He called it an investment in someone who had already proven what kind of person he would become. In the spring, almost 6 months after the morning behind the cypress trees, Richard walked out into the garden one Saturday and found Elijah sitting on the low stone wall near the greenhouse, a notebook open on his knees. He was drawing the new rose bushes that Tessa had planted along the south fence. Richard sat down beside him. "You still draw," he said. "My dad used to draw," Elijah said. "My mom told me he died when I was little. She said he drew on everything, receipts, napkins, the backs of bills." Richard had not known this. He nodded slowly. "Then you come by it honestly," he said. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the wind move through the leaves. "Mr. Calloway," Elijah said quietly. "Yes. Do you ever still feel scared about that morning?" Richard thought about the question. He thought about it for a long time because the boy deserved a real answer. "Sometimes," he said, "not the way I felt it then. But sometimes I wake up at night and I remember the sound of the engine at the gate, and I think about how close I came to walking past you and not stopping. And what I feel then is not fear exactly. It is something more like gratitude that has not yet learned how to sit still." Elijah nodded slowly. He understood in the way that children sometimes understand things adults cannot put into words. "My mom says," he said, "that doing the right thing does not always make your life easier, but it lets you look at yourself in the mirror without having to look away." Richard looked out across the garden at the greenhouse glowing softly in the spring light. "Your mom is right," he said. "She has been right about almost everything." This story is a reminder that the most dangerous threats in our lives rarely arrive as strangers. They wear familiar faces, share our dinners, and know our schedules. And it reminds us that courage does not come from size or status or wealth. A child with honesty and the will to speak can change the entire course of a powerful man's life. Always pay attention to the small things. Never look away from what you know is wrong. And never underestimate the difference one brave voice can make.